welcome back to my channel. I am very excited for today's video. It's going to be a continuation of last week's How I Grew My 4C Hair Part 1. This is going to be Part 2. And today I am going to be talking about detangling. This to me is the enemy. I have not combed my hair in 3.5 years, and this is the longest and healthiest my hair has ever been in my life. Go figure. We don't need to comb our hair. We need to detangle our hair. Detangling and combing are two very different things. The goal of detangling is to remove shed hair, because we shed on average about 50 strands of hair per day. Because our hair characteristically likes to interlock on itself almost like a web or a nest, those hairs are oftentimes trapped within all of the kinkiness of the curls in our hair. So those shed hairs, if left in your hair unchecked for long periods of time where they are being moved and manipulated, are going to knot within itself. Those knots get bigger and bigger, and they cause breakage, because eventually you get to a point where you can't undo the knot. So detangling my hair for me is methodically trying to go in and take out those knots. A comb does not have the ability to detangle a knot. My hair strands are much thinner than these individual stick things here. So there's no way that it could ever detangle my hair like I can when I'm using my fingers. When I'm detangling it, I can feel each knot, and I can work to pull apart each strand and try to save it. Our hair is very loud and very voluminous, and I think because of that, people tend to think that it is very strong, but it's not. It's extremely, extremely fragile. So things that other people do to their hair, like combing, right, may be perfectly fine for someone with a looser curl pattern than me with a thicker hair strand, but that same combing routine that they do for their hair would destroy my hair. Our hair does not have to be 100% detangled. I am never going to be able to run a comb through my hair, and I don't need to. I'm perfectly fine with the fact that this comb stands no chance against my hair, and I'm not going to try to force it through it, because all I'm doing is ripping it. We think that when we take a comb and we pull it through our hair and we yank at tangles and knots, when those tangles and knots are pulled out of our hair, we call that detangling. It's not detangling the knot, it is ripping out the knot. So naturally, a comb is always going to break more hair. You're always going to break hair regardless of what you do. When you are manipulating your hair, you're gonna break a few strands. There's no way to get around it. You just have to accept that. So with that in mind, you can reduce the manipulation that you are doing to your hair, and detangling and how we detangle our hair is one of the biggest culprits of excessive manipulation. And I'll insert some footage of when I'm detangling my hair. So in this first detangling clip, I'm gonna be working on old hair that was in a twist out. So a lot of my ends had reverted and were tangled up upon themselves. So I'm going to be using Carol's Daughter's oil blend and just regular water. I'm going to start by lightly misting my hair. My goal is to not oversaturate my hair. I'm just trying to get it damp enough to where the hair is more pliable. So as you can see here, from just smoothing it downward with the oil and water, I was able to undo a lot of those tangles. But if I had tried to do that without any water, it would have been a disaster. I like to think of it like spaghetti. If you were to take spaghetti and bend it in half while it's dry, it would just break. But once you boil that spaghetti and add in moisture, it becomes a lot more pliable. Our hair reacts that same way. You never want to detangle hair that is completely dry, because you're just asking for breakage. So now I'm just looking at the knots that I still have so I can deal with them. I'm just literally untangling each knot the same way you would your shoelaces or any general knot, just trying to take apart those hairs strand by strand. And most importantly, I'm trying to be extremely gentle with it. So here I've got a knot. My hair has dried up, so I'm going to add a bit more water because I can feel that it's starting to become like crunchy again. And I'm going to continue that same smoothing downward pattern. You'd be surprised by how many tangles you can get out by just continuing to smooth downward your hair with some type of lubricant and oil and a water mixture. And I'm just paying extra attention to the ends of my hair since that's where a lot of those tangles were. And now I've been able to push down a lot of the shed hairs that were accumulating, and those were those hairs that were hanging off that you saw. Those were the shed hairs that could cause breakage. So I'm trying to take apart those shed hairs. As you can see here, I'm literally going in strand by strand, trying to remove them out of that knot. Unfortunately, in this process, you will typically still break a couple of hairs. I broke a couple of hairs when doing this, but in comparison to if I had taken a comb, that comb would have taken that entire knot. And with that knot, it would have taken inches off of the hairs surrounding it that were involved in the knot. With my fingers, even with breaking a couple of strands, the damage is a lot less. So now I'm going to be showing you a different detangling session. This was a pre-wash detangling session, so I like to be a bit more thorough in my detangling before washing. So I'm actually going to be using a TGIN conditioner to help me detangle for this session. And my hair had been in a defined twist out, so my hair strands weren't as tangled towards the bottom like in the previous clip. They were more so clumped together in those curl tendril formations. So what I'm doing is I'm running that conditioner through my hair, and I'm just trying to separate those tendrils that have clumped together apart. And all I have to do in order to separate them is literally use my fingers to make additional sections over and over again. I'm just separating the hair over and over again. And anytime I feel a clump or any hairs that are matted together, I go into that clump and I try to take them apart. So I typically start out in the middle and then I move my way back up to the roots. I just tend to have a better overall result doing it that way. And I'm just pulling apart the hairs, anywhere I can feel that, they need to be separated. And oftentimes what I'll do is I will subdivide a section. I like to work in very small sections because when you have a large section, it can become overwhelming and you end up maybe rushing through it or skipping through knots. So I'll subdivide a section and work on smaller areas that need more attention. So that's what I ended up doing here. There were a lot of clumpings in this area, so I'm just continuing to go in and pull apart those hairs, and I'm also incorporating, some of that downward smoothing motion like was shown in the first detangling clip, but I am primarily focusing on just trying to remove a lot of those clumps, because if left unchecked, those clumps will 100% turn into dreadlocks. And as beautiful as dreadlocks are, that is not what I'm going for today. So I'm just continuing to pull those apart and pull those individual hairs that are tangled out of those knots strand by strand. And the reason why I'm using conditioner for this detangling session as opposed to a water and oil mixture is simply because what I plan on doing with my hair afterwards. This is for a wash day, so all of this conditioner will be washed out. For the first one, I was getting it ready for a long-term protective style, so I didn't want to have conditioner or anything like that going into that style. So now I'm going to be showing you what I do when I've met my match. This is a knot that I was not able to remove any further. So unfortunately now it has to die. So I am going to grab a pair of scissors and I'm going to cut one strand as close to the base of that knot as I can to try to preserve as much hair as I can. Then I'm going to use my fingers to again pull at those strands and see, now that I've cut one strand, has that loosened up the knot at all to where I can remove another hair. Unfortunately, with this situation, I could not. So I'm going to go in and cut another strand, and then I'm just going to be left with the remaining knot hanging off of that one strand, and then I'm just going to cut that. Now that was for a knot that had 3 or 4 strands left at the end. Some people may be wondering, why would you go through all of that effort for just 3 strands? But over time, that will accumulate. So I treat every strand like it's important, no strand left behind. I will do everything in my power to save every single one of them. And that over time is what attributes to fullness of your hair. So now I'm just going to allow some additional detangling footage to play while I go over some tips and closing thoughts on this topic. So first off, if you are wondering if your usage of detangling tools could potentially be contributing to your lack of length retention, what I would recommend you first do is to take inventory of where you're at. And by that I mean the next time you have a detangling session, gather up all of the hair that comes out around you as well as the hair that is stuck in that comb or that brush, and take those hairs apart and analyze them. If you are pulling out long strands of hair that have a white bulb at the end, then you know those are hairs that would have needed to be removed anyways because those are shed hairs. But if you're noticing a lot of broken hairs, then you know that your tool is breaking your hair. And then think about how many times you detangle your hair per month, per year, per quarter, whatever, and think about removing those amount of broken hairs, if not more, in each of those sessions. Over a period of time, this is what is really largely contributing to you not being able to see your length. So if you do want to start finger detangling, some things that I think are very important in having a successful finger detangling journey is number one, you want to make sure that you're working on hair that is stretched, not shrunken. By shrunken, I mean our hair's natural state when it's in that afro or very, very coiled form. There's nothing wrong with that state in regards to how it looks. I actually think it looks really cool, but the issue is when you condense a lot of length into just a few inches, you're gonna have a lot more tangling. So when I'm detangling my hair, I wanna make sure that it's stretched. And in order to do that, I want to not oversaturate my hair. I don't want my hair to be too wet because if it's too wet, it's gonna go back and revert. So I'm very careful with how much water I apply, or I just try to use products like a conditioner that has some water in it where it's not gonna completely revert my hair, but it's gonna allow me to work with my hair while it's in a stretched state. 2, like I mentioned previously, you want to make sure you're working in small sections. Large sections will overwhelm you and it will make you rush through your hair and potentially do more damage by just ripping through it. Using small sections really allows you to pay attention to those individual knots, and it will actually make the process quicker as opposed to trying to finger detangle one large chunk of hair at one time. 3, your hair does not have to be 100% detangled, because I'm sure you've seen where you detangled your hair or you thought you detangled your hair and then you went right back into your hair 15 minutes later and those same tangles that you thought you got rid of, guess what? They're right back there. That's just how your hair is going to be. So when I'm detangling my hair, my goal is not to get every single tangle out. My goal is to get enough tangles out that is required to put my hair into whatever style I'm trying to do. The most amount of detangling that I will do is before a wash day because I don't want my hair to mat up in those braids when I'm washing it. But aside from that, I'm just trying to do the bare minimum detangling required for me to put it into a style because it's always going to be tangled. So you got to learn to just submit to that a little bit and let it go. 4, you want to make sure that you are creating as much of a relaxing environment as you possibly can. You want to do it on a day where you have a lot of time, where you're well rested. Get your favorite show that you're looking forward to binging and get that ready for you. I'm a big anime fan, so I'm currently going through Naruto. I'm on episode like 455. So for me, I get to look forward to my detangling sessions because I know I'm going to get to catch up on the Great Fourth Ninja War and figure out what happens. So whatever that is for you, try to create that kind of environment. And number 5, do not be afraid to take a break when needed. There are times when I'm doing my hair when I can start to feel like I'm becoming frustrated because my hair is not acting the way that I would like it to act. And because I'm frustrated, I'm more aggressive and rough with it because I'm starting to get angry. That's when it's time to just take a step back. You're acting a little bit crazy. I'm acting a little bit crazy. I'm just going to leave this situation and walk away, go to the kitchen, grab a snack, maybe a glass of wine, and we're both going to calm down until we know how to treat each other right. Sometimes that's the conversation I need to have with my hair because it just likes to get wild, and it's like I've got somewhere to be and you're just being all crazy. So just talking yourself down from that ledge of shaving your head and just taking some time to cool off will really help with preserving the state of your hair so that you don't rip it all out in an angry rage. And finally, I just want to say that I understand that finger detangling your hair strand by strand is a huge sacrifice. That session that I had in those clips, one of them was a 12-hour detangling session that I did over the course of 2 days, and the other one was just a 5-hour detangling session. Either way, both of those were a ridiculous amount of time. I understand that. It is a sacrifice. There are times when I have to tell people, my fiance, my family, like, no, I have to do my hair that weekend, or I have to do this at that time, so I won't be able to make that event. I make my hair a priority. I make and carve time for it. And honestly, I don't think that there's anything wrong with that because I view it as good stewardship. And it makes me think of the story in the Bible, the parable of the talents. In that story, the master gave out different amounts of talents to each of his 3 servants, and he was looking to see what they could produce from those. And the 2 servants who were given 5 and 3 were able to double their amount and present that to their master when he returned. But the last one, who was only given 1, out of fear, decided to squander his talent and just bury it in the ground, and his master was very disappointed in him. Growing up, when we had to get our hair done and it was so painful and the comb just hurt, it made me compare myself to other textures of hair and argue with God, like, why did you do this to me? Why did you give me this type of hair? Why did you give me hair that is so difficult to manage, so difficult to maintain? You know what? Because of that, I'm not even going to try to do anything with this because I can't make anything of it because you chose to give me less. But now that I'm older, I realize that was not the correct perspective to have. Life is not fair. And we are all given different talents. They may not all be equivalent to each other, but that doesn't matter. That's not the point. Our goal is not to try to make our hair what someone else's is, or to try to make our journey or our maintenance routine the same as somebody else's. It's to try to make the most out of what we've been given. That is good stewardship. So it doesn't matter if it takes me 5 hours or 12 hours. My goal and my commitment is that I will put in the time, I will put in the work, I will put in the effort to make the most out of the talent or the hair that God has decided to give me. But that is a choice that I've made at this current, point and phase in my life, and it's up to you to decide what level of stewardship you are willing and are able to put in. Obviously, we all have different schedules and different routines. And another final note that I want to make is detangling is not something that I'm doing often. I'm not doing it often. I'm not even doing it monthly. I'm doing it maybe a few times a year. And that is because in my current hair care journey, I'm doing a lot of long-term protective styling, which allows me not to have to work on my hair like that on a day in and day out basis. But I'm not going to talk about that too much right now because that's actually going to be the topic for next week's video. And it's the part in my hair care routine that is definitely the most fun for me because I get to get really creative. So I'm looking forward to talking about long-term protective styling. And yeah, that's pretty much it for this video. Thank you again for watching. I know that this was even longer than last time, but again, I want to make sure that I am being as thorough as I possibly can. And I could speak about all of these topics ad nauseum. So the fact that I could even fit it into 20 minutes to me is impressive. Hopefully this video was helpful. Hopefully it gave you some insight on how you could finger detangle. Please let me know in the comments below your thoughts, your feedback, your questions, your comments, concerns, all that jazz. So thank you guys, and I look forward to chatting with you next week.